Scott.
All right, everybody. It is December 10th. We're here for a work session of the City Council, and we'll begin with public comment on non-agenda items. If there's any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on an item that is not on our agenda, now is your chance. Go ahead and come forward in the room. Seeing none, I'll close public comment, and we'll open our first work session, which is alleyway activation, transforming hidden spaces. City Engineer, welcome.
Thank you, Council. There it goes. Okay. All right. Good evening, Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to present this work session for activating downtown alleyways in Laramie. This work session is about reimagining spaces that often go unnoticed, our alleys, and transforming them into areas that contribute to the city's economic vitality, social connections, and environmental sustainability. As a city, we face unique challenges with our narrow alleys, but these spaces also present untapped opportunities, and tonight I'll outline the concept of alley activation, discuss the challenges we face, and share tailored strategies that respect Laramie's character and constraints. And by the end of this presentation, I hope you'll see that how this project could enhance our downtown area while maintaining the functionality these alleys provide. So alleyway activation involves taking spaces that are often overlooked and underutilized and turning them into assets for our community. Historically, alleys have served as back-end spaces for utilities, deliveries, and trash collection. And while these functions remain essential, there's no reason they can't coexist with other uses. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many cities activated their alleys as outdoor dining spaces, providing safe and socially distanced options for residents. For Laramie, alley activation can mean hosting pop-up markets, art installation, or community events that bring vibrancy and activity to these spaces. The goal is to make alleys welcoming, functional, and visually appealing while respecting their original purpose. This is about making better use of what we already have, maximizing their potential, and improving the quality of life for residents and visitors alike. There are 4 key elements to a successful alley activation strategy. First, we need to reimagine the purpose, and this means shifting our mindset from seeing alleys as solely as a service corridors to envisioning them as community-centric spaces. An alley doesn't have to just be a place for trash bins, it can also be a place for public art or small gatherings. Second, we need to have community engagement. The success of this initiative depends on buy-in from local businesses, residents, and community groups. Their input ensures the designs reflect our city's unique character and address local needs. Third, we need to have design enhancements. This could include practical and aesthetic improvements such as better lighting, public art, seating, and even greenery. These features make alleys more inviting and usable. And finally, we need to have sustainability. Green infrastructure like permeable pavers or rain gardens can help manage stormwater, reduce heat, and improve air quality. This isn't just about aesthetics, it's also about creating environmentally responsible spaces. Visual enhancements are often the first and easiest step for activating an alley. Public art such as murals or sculptures can completely transform the perception of an alley. Art not only beautifies the space, but also creates a sense of place, drawing people in. Lighting is another powerful tool. String lights or decorative fixtures can make alleys feel safer and more welcoming, especially in evenings. A well-lit alley becomes an attractive shortcut rather than a space people avoid. And wayfinding or signage are equally important. Creative signs that point out alleys' amenities or nearby attractions encourage exploration. This is especially valuable in connecting different parts of the downtown, making alleys a larger part of the pedestrian network. These enhancements are cost-effective and can be implemented rather quickly, offering immediate benefits while laying the groundwork for more extensive projects. When we think creatively, alleys can also serve a variety of purposes. For instance, imagine a pedestrian-friendly or bike route that links popular downtown destinations. Such a pathway could be enhanced with bike racks, benches, and landscaping, making it both practical and enjoyable for use. Seating and tables are another option, allowing adjacent businesses to extend their services outdoors, and this could include dining for restaurants or display spaces for retail shops. Green alleyways offer yet another opportunity. By incorporating permeable pavers, planters, or green walls, we can improve the environmental performance of these spaces while making them more attractive. These elements also help with stormwater management, which is an important consideration here in Laramie. Ultimately, thinking outside the box allows us to see alleys not just as a functional space, but as opportunities to enhance connectivity, community interaction, and environmental stewardship. Laramie's alleys play a critical role in our city's infrastructure. They provide access for essential services like trash collection, deliveries, and utility maintenance. However, their narrow dimensions create challenges when trying to introduce additional uses. Our typical alley downtown is about 16 feet wide, so it gets pretty narrow, and that is usually right up next to that building is where that property line is. For example, alleys often don't have the width to accommodate both vehicle access and pedestrian activity at the same time, and this means any activation efforts must carefully plan around these constraints. Despite these challenges, narrow alleys hold a significant potential, and activation could take the form of temporary or time-shared uses. For instance, a delivery-focused alley in the morning could transition to a pedestrian-friendly use in the evening. This approach respects the functional needs of the space while creating opportunities for public enjoyment. So a picture speaks 1,000 words, and I have a few pictures on our next few slides, and I want you to kind of carefully look at these pictures and kind of look around them maybe in a different way. These pictures were provided by the planning division, so appreciate that and everything. I stole them from them, but they're great pictures to use in this presentation. So when discussing activating Laramie's narrow alleys, several challenges must be considered. We have space limitations. The narrow width of many alleys restricts the ability to introduce permanent elements. For instance, outdoor seating or art installations may pose challenges as they can obstruct the flow of deliveries, pedestrian traffic, and vehicle access. These limitations require careful planning to ensure functionality and safety. We also have access challenges. A significant concern is maintaining access to the overhead franchise utilities, which it's a little hard to see in here, but we have several above in our alleyways that are in there, and that's for power and communication lines. We also have sewer lines that run usually underneath our downtown alleys. These systems require regular maintenance and emergency service access, making it critical to avoid permanent obstructions beneath these utilities. Additionally, alleys often house restaurant oil containers alongside trash and recycling bins, and these are necessary for businesses but can limit available space and pose aesthetic or logistical challenges. We have safety concerns. Narrow alleyways need adequate lighting and clear sight lines to ensure pedestrian activity, especially after dark. And we also have drainage issues like pooling water or ice are also risks that must be addressed to create a safe environment. We have weather and maintenance. Snow removal and ice management are perennial challenges, particularly given Laramie's winters, and ensuring these alleys remain accessible for both operational and public activation will require consistent upkeep and thoughtful design choices. And given these constraints, activating narrow alleyways requiring balance and operational needs with creative solutions and strategies like temporary installations, shared use schedules, and portable designs may allow us to test ideas while minimizing disruption. Thoughtful design and stakeholder collaboration will be essential to overcome these challenges and unlock the potential of Laramie's alleys. So activating narrow alleyways in Laramie requires a thoughtful approach to balance their functional roles with creative new uses. And let's explore some of these strategies in more detail. We could have visual enhancements. Adding public art like murals or sculptures can immediately transform the feel of an alley and make it inviting and memorable. Aesthetic lighting is particularly effective for narrow alleys. String lights or wall-mounted fixtures not only improve safety, but also create a warm and engaging atmosphere for evening use. And we can also have wayfinding signage that integrate alleys into larger pedestrian network, encouraging exploration and highlighting nearby businesses and attractions. We can look at temporary activations. Short-term usage, such as pop-up shops, food trucks, or art exhibits, allow us to test the potential of an alley without requiring permanent changes. Seasonal events like winter markets or summer outdoor movie nights can draw diverse crowds to these spaces while demonstrating their value. We can use a shared use by schedule, allocating specific times for different activities, ensure the alleys remain functional for their essential roles such as deliveries and trash collection, while also opening them up for pedestrian or community use during designated hours. For example, an alley might be reserved for deliveries in the morning and host an outdoor dining or public event in the afternoon or evening. We can focus on key alleyways. Not all alleys have equal potential for activation. By prioritizing alleys with fewer operational constraints, such as limited trash collections or minimal utility access, we can start with high-impact projects that demonstrate success. Selecting alleys near high-traffic areas like downtown shopping or dining hubs ensures these spaces attract engagement and usage. Stakeholder collaboration is important. Engaging local businesses, residents, and utility providers early in the planning process is essential. Their insights help us design practical solutions that align with real needs while fostering community buy-in. And partnerships with local artists or community groups can add cultural significance to the project, ensuring it reflects Laramie's unique character. We can have portable or modular installations. Given the space constraints in narrow alleys, portable or modular elements like movable planters, foldable tables, or temporary art displays offer flexibility. These installations can be adjusted based on operational needs or removed entirely during maintenance or adverse weather. We can also have green infrastructure integration. Incorporating planters, green walls, or permeable pavers not only enhance aesthetics but also provides environmental benefits like improved stormwater management and reduced urban heat. And even small touches like hanging planters or climbing vines can make a significant visual impact in narrow spaces. By combining these strategies, we can effectively activate narrow alleys, transforming them into spaces that balance functionality with creativity and community engagement. Each alley can serve as a tailored solution reflecting the needs of the specific location and users. So we already have some framework set up that support alley activation, and we can probably include this with some minor tweaking. We have our right-of-way encroachment permits. These permits allow for both short-term and long-term uses, such as outdoor seating or business displays, and they provide a pathway for businesses to expand their operation into adjacent alleys, creating more vibrant and engaging spaces. We also have our special events permits. These permits are particularly beneficial for temporary activations such as art shows, outdoor markets, and small festivals. And they allow us to test creative ideas in alleys without requiring permanent changes to infrastructure, making them a flexible and low-cost option. Another advantage is these permits streamline logistics for organizers, ensuring events comply with city regulations while minimizing disruptions to everyday alley operations. For example, we could host an evening pop-up events in alleys featuring local vendors, live music, and art installations, all under the special event permit. These events can not only draw people to the downtown, but also showcase the potential of activated alleys, helping build community support for more permanent transformations. By leveraging these permits, we can balance the need of functionality with opportunities for creative and economic development, and these tools are essential for turning ideas into action while keeping our alleys operational. We could start with small pilot projects to test ideas and gather feedback. For example, an evening market with string lights, food trucks, and live music could show the potential for alleys as community spaces. Temporary art solution or installations that reflect Laramie's unique culture and history could also draw attention to these spaces, and pilot projects allow us to refine our approach before committing to larger scale implementations. The benefits of activating alleys in Laramie extend far more than just aesthetics, and let's explore these key advantages. We can have community engagement. Activated alleys provide new spaces for residents to gather, whether for socializing, dining, or enjoying events. And these spaces foster a sense of belonging and creative opportunities for community-driven activities such as art installation or markets that highlight local talent. We can have an economic boost. Increased foot traffic directly benefits nearby businesses, boosting their visibility and revenue. Events hosted in alleys like pop-up shops or food markets create opportunities for small business and entrepreneurs to thrive. And enhanced alleys also increase property values, contributing to the overall economic health of the downtown Laramie. We have aesthetic improvements. Enhanced alleys add charm and character to our downtown. Public art, greenery, and lighting turn previously overlooked spaces into visually appealing destinations. These improvements can make Laramie more attractive to visitors and potentially new residents, enforcing our city's unique identity. We have environmental benefits. Green infrastructure like permeable pavers or grain gardens improve stormwater management and reduce urban heat. And incorporating native plants and sustainable materials can also enhance biodiversity in the urban areas. We have an enhanced connectivity. Activated alleys can act as a pedestrian-friendly links between key downtown locations, making it easier and more enjoyable to navigate our city. And by transforming alleys into welcoming paths, we can improve overall walkability and encourage less reliance on vehicles in certain areas. We can also support our downtown, upcoming downtown construction project. With these upcoming projects in the downtown Laramie, activating alleys can serve as alternate routes or temporary spaces for businesses to continue operations. And these efforts also help mitigate the disruption caused by construction, keeping our downtown vibrant and accessible. When we activate our alleys, we're not just transforming a single space, we're creating a ripple effect that enhances the quality of life for residents, strengthen our community, and build a more sustainable future for Laramie. So thank you for your time and attention on activating alleys. Hopefully this kind of gave you kind of a little bit of background on what we could do and what alley activation is. It is a unique opportunity to enhance our city while respecting the operational role these spaces play. Look forward to hearing any thoughts or questions you may have. And we also have some of our planning staff here tonight to help with any questions as well.
Thank you, City Engineer. Council members, any questions? Councilor Gabriel, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Eric. Very thorough presentation. And you talked about the restrictions that we have with alleys. I'm just curious, has Main Street presented any kind of proposal or ideas that maybe could enhance our alley structure?
I personally haven't had any conversations with Main Street. I'm kind of looking at our planning to see if they've had any, but.
Mr. Gabatuller, and Councilor Richardson, you can hop in on this question too if you have any ideas. But please, Mr. Gabatuller, go ahead.
Yes, Honorable Mayor, through you to Councilor Gabriel. We don't have any specific recommendations yet from them. Kind of the idea from this is to see where this discussion goes this evening, and then obviously survey the downtown business owners to see the appetite for, any types of improvements that, have been discussed and presented. She is aware that we're having this work session, obviously, but nothing more at this point. We just want to see where the direction comes for, evaluating code, how we can change things to perhaps activate alleyways further. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gabriel. City Manager, and then to you, Councilor Richardson.
Just to follow up a little bit, from a general perspective through you, Mayor, Councilor Gabriel, we have had conversations for a number of years with downtown interests, including Laramie Main Street Association, with respect to activating alleys, ranging from how could alley activation in a limited way, if not a comprehensive way, increase economically viable property in the downtown, right? And also, as you heard from the city engineer, increase the available space in the downtown for public access, events, fun, all of those kinds of things. But I think largely the conversation, we even at some point, probably 5-6 years ago, explored whether there might be an alley that we could activate as sort of a test project or a demonstration project to just test the viability and the interests of the community, as our planning manager said, for doing something like this. So I would plant that seed again if this is something that council might like like to do. I think the city engineers indicated, maybe some sort of beta test in an alley that is in fact ready to receive some improvements might be a good way to start and kind of sense the community's appetite for it broadly, but also in the downtown area.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilor Richardson?
Thanks. Just to add a little bit onto that, the Downtown Development Authority kind of explored very quickly this idea, and it was more around what City Manager just explained, an alley that could potentially be activated and looking at grant funding for that. But at that point, it didn't really go anywhere, but it has been a part of their discussion as well. I think they are interested, though, in kind of getting a plan in place before moving forward with something else, from my understanding.
Thank you, Councilor. And Councilor Gabriel, just as a note, I did speak with Trey briefly today, and obviously she's got her other name tag on right now and is at the Capitol on Appropriations Committee budget hearings. So just as a note that's why she's not here. But she did note, I guess, just so it's on the record, the need, and Mr. Jepp, you noted our upcoming construction. She noted that maybe the need along 3rd Street for this consideration with that upcoming resurfacing of the length that maybe businesses on 3rd Street might really benefit from this through that process. So,
Your Alma Mayor, to add to that, just
please,
for clarification, we do have that upcoming 3rd Street with YDOT. We also have years out, probably I think over 5 years out, we have kind of reconstructing in the downtown area, and we're going to go through conceptual design. But this could, what I was noting there is that could help with access, especially as we're working like on 1st or 2nd Street in that area.
Thank you. Yeah, that context is appreciated. Other questions, council members? Please, Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Mayor. This will obviously be an attraction to the downtown. It'll bring a lot of additional amenities to the downtown with the food trucks, the art, and all the other things that, more well-lit alleys. Has there been discussion about the pressure that it puts on parking for the downtown or any place where there is alley enhancements?
I'm a mayor through you. This is just kind of a conceptual idea that I'm presenting tonight. We haven't had any formal discussions on, how this would actually be activated or, implemented or anything like that at this time.
Thank you. Councilor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I certainly like the idea of enhancing some of the lighting, no matter what occurs in some of the alleys downtown, just from strictly a safety perspective for people who might be literally stumbling through those alleyways. From
Which is normally the case.
right. From my other question has to do with, have we, as a community, looked at what percentage of our alleyways actually have parking behind the business for people who might be living upstairs or own the business, which would then perhaps eliminate that as an alleyway of consideration, because certainly people need to come and go from their parking that sits behind their business. Have we taken a look at what percentage that happens to be? I mean, I can think of a couple of businesses where the people own the building, live upstairs, and then literally have parking behind, right? So if they're coming and going in their regular course of business or activities during the day, it's like we can't really do a pop-up restaurant behind where they park. So do we know what percentage of our businesses and alleyways downtown have actual parking?
Your Mayor, through you, we haven't run any specific analysis on the alleys yet at this time. We kind of more wanted to gauge council's feeling on all of this, but you're 100% correct. There are several alleys down there that, there are tenants that are coming and going at all hours of the day up in there, and that is where you run into some of the problems with a more permanent installation or anything along that. So that's definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration, and we would have to see if we could work with them if we decided to activate an alley and do like a special event or something like that. to see if that was supported, or maybe that specific alley is not an option because of those tenants, or maybe be business parking that's back there. But there are quite a few of those alleys in the downtown area that do have tenant or some kind of parking in the back.
Yeah, I would certainly be supportive of that being like a next step or one of the steps to really look at where we could actually do some things that maybe enhance some sort of traffic or people walking around different areas. That's it for me, really. I like the idea.
Thank you.
Generally.
Thank you, Councilor Pierce. Councilor Richardson, and then Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Kind of echoing that I like some of these ideas, keeping in mind the realities of what these alleyways are and the uses that they are currently. I would, I guess, ensuring that what we do, I like the idea of some more temporary things, because looking at what the investment would be to create something permanent in these very small spaces, maneuvering around downtown can be a little tight anyway. I appreciate that starting point, and like the idea of Councilor Pierce's suggestion of getting a real understanding of what those alleyways are functioning as currently.
Thank you, Councilor. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a very exciting proposal, and I have seen such in the South, in cities like Charleston, South Carolina, Greenville, also Charlotte, North Carolina, where in the heart of their downtown areas, that certain selective alleys were open space and highly walkable. There were no cars. It was well lighted. It was just part of the ambiance and vibrancy of the downtown. Have you thought, so let's say that we're all agreeable and think this is a positive direction. Have you thought about the next systematic steps that you would recommend or that we should take? I'm seeing we need a survey of downtown people. We need to evaluate code. As Councilor Pierce brought up, we need to do a survey of a best available space. What are some other things, or what are some approaches that you've considered that we need to start engaging in order to bring this forward?
Honorable Mayor, through you, that's a good question. I think we would probably, as you stated, go assess the alleys, see which ones are an option. Definitely community engagement, I think, could be very critical. See if this is supported by the downtown, the businesses. I talked about, deliveries and everything else. Make sure that this isn't going to adversely impact their business rather than benefit it, because that's something we don't want to do is, come in and say, oh, we're going to do all this wonderful stuff, but it actually is going to hurt a business more. Take a look at that community engagement. Start looking at maybe some conceptual designs that could be looked at, making sure that the alley could work, temporary, installations. We could even look at, like we talked about, lighting, or even just some kind of visual of public art or something like that. I know many of our alleys already have that downtown, but could look at enhancements of just making the alleys feel more appealing. And probably start with maybe a pilot program or a test project for that. We might need some funding if we wanted to put up lighting or any kind of green infrastructure, maybe work with a community group for the maintenance of that, or Parks and Rec or whatever. So I think there'd be quite a few steps if council did want to explore this further to see what alleys would work and how exactly they could work.
Can I ask one more question? I'm just wondering, as you've been thinking through this, if you've considered, you showed some pictures of alleys that actually do show some things. They're so offensive, the overrunning dumpsters. So that brings me to the question of, have you considered what you might do with the dumpsters and how to manage trash pickup, or would that kind of limit where we could put alleys or
Alba, Mayor, through you. Trash pickup is definitely going to be a challenge and is in most of the alleys. I think we'd probably have to just try to work around it the best we could if it was in an area or something. I mean, there are options for trash pickup, but I don't think they're probably economically viable for this type of a system or anything like that.
Thank you. Yeah, they certainly, I had considered the trash pickup as well, right? You're not going to want to, if you are a restaurant, you're not going to want to spend any money activating your alley if your customers are going to eat across from like a grease dumpster, right? And so that would be a hurdle, I think. I mean, I think it's something that should be considered, and certainly considered even in a pilot program. Certainly should be remedied if there's any sort of permanent consideration down the road. But Councilor Doherty? Oh, Councilor Newman and then Councilor Doherty. Sorry, Councilor Newman.
Yeah.
I've done that to you like 1,000 times.
Yeah, it's fine. But let me add a tally. No.
Yeah.
I do like that we're having this discussion. There are a whole bunch of cities nationwide. Vice Mayor said some. Back home, Kansas City, Kansas did this, and the traffic for the downtown there increased, and businesses increased on their profits and whatnot. So I do like that we're having this discussion. Obviously, we all know that there's a problem. If we look at page 6 and 7 of the PowerPoints, as a person who is in early discussions of maybe a business here in Laramie, that would turn me off to even going down and looking at storefronts downtown. So addressing those, some of the other concerns that as we are doing this, that we should be addressing, one would be parking. We all know this, that's not anything. But the lighting, as Councilor Pierce said, I don't go downtown because of that. So looking at kind of that stuff. Food trucks downtown, I think, are a great option when it comes to like fast, food per se, like they do at the farmer's market. I love going down there, and if we can incorporate that into some of this without taking away from some of the other businesses would be fantastic. And lastly, and I can't believe I'm going to say this because usually I don't support stuff, but public art would be fantastic down there. And I'm not lying. Like some of the murals and stuff down there are amazing, and we can continue to add to that, I think. So that's what I have to say. I don't have any questions, just ranting.
Thanks, Councilor. Councilor Doherty.
Yes, for me, the food in the alleys is a big disconnect there because of, I want a good cleaning of the alley before I had dinner down there. But I do use the alleys a lot, and I usually take visitors anytime somebody comes to Laramie. I make them walk through all the alleys to see all the artwork. So I love the idea of having the pop-up kinds of things, because you make sure, I don't know that we need a study of what percentage have parking. You say, hey, the alley between, just pick an alley, and if you know all the neighbors and everybody says, cool, I'll give up my parking space for this event tonight, or over the weekend. I think for a particular event, you would just make sure that the neighbors there are all in favor. And so many of the downtown residents are big downtown supporters. So I think you could get buy-in from some of them. And then I was wondering, is our special permit, that kind of stuff, is that available now, or is that something council we'd have to come up with a permitting system if somebody wants to try have a quick event in an alley? Does our current system allow that, or would we need new things to allow?
Yeah, but Mayor, through you. So our right-of-way encroachment permits wouldn't be maybe like that special event you're talking about, but we set that up years ago, especially for the business encroachment and everything. And then we have both temporary and long-term that's also options. So like, even if you're wanting to put in some kind of decorative, that's actually a free permit that you could apply for. So probably with some slight edits to that framework is already there. As far as the special event permit, we already have kind of seen some events in our alleys already. We would have to see exactly what that permit looks like, but I think the way that's currently set up, we could probably make it work how it is right now, and there wouldn't be any like changes to ordinance for those permits or anything like that. We could get those going if someone wanted to put in tomorrow, probably.
So it sounds like if somebody's creative and has the energy and the ideas and maybe a little grant funding, there's nothing stopping them from doing that. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, Your Honor, Mayor, through you, you know, if it's just a, you know, an event, if they wanted to have a, you know, an art party in an alley or something like that, I think the special event permit could handle that right now. If they wanted to do a little bit more, we might have to just see exactly what they're wanting to do, but definitely a strong possibility to make that move forward.
Yeah, please, Councilor. Go ahead. Yeah, Councilor Shumway.
Obviously, there's support for this, and I think it's a great idea to attract people to downtown. I'm concerned that once we get a great amount of participation and the alleys are being, you know, flooded with people, we have to eliminate cars going in and out, running people, you know, going to an art exhibit or to a food truck or something. We're going to have to close it off to vehicle travel. And if what Councilor O'Doherty said, it's just a grease pit, maybe we need to block off the 16-foot and have one way and then have parking on one side and then traffic on the other side to go through, so we could increase parking downtown. Just some things that we can kick around and talk about.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? I think maybe the only thing I have to add to that, I share much of the council's opinion, but I think one of the reasons that I would support this is this council and the last council have been really proactive in first meeting sort of the needs of the pandemic by allowing new uses, first with Hollyhock Commons. Year one, I think Hollyhock Commons was very well used. Year two, I don't know. There's no data to this. I'm just somebody who's downtown a lot, and I would say it fell off, right? And the same thing I think happened with the parklet, though I think those are still used much more. And I think the same thing happens with Paradise Lane. And I think these things shift because they're fun and exciting and new. And so I think this makes a lot of sense in a continuation of trying new things to bring people downtown and new uses of our downtown. There are obviously hurdles, you know, parking, and I think trash is a significant hurdle, figuring out how to handle that, more so even in, I mean, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but more so even than those private parking spots behind, because I think the people who have those private parking spots are going to benefit from the activation of the alley on it, I think more likely than not. But I don't think you fully realize some of the benefit of this until it becomes, to your point, Councilor Shumway, I had maybe a different take on that I think maybe once it becomes more the norm and it is more consistently used, I think that's when we would fully realize the economic benefit of doing this, because that's when it becomes viable to open a business that has a storefront only facing the alley, right? And that's what you see in cities. I think that's what you see in, certainly like in Nashville, there's like Printers Alley and those sort of things. They have businesses that open only into the alley. I mean, those exist in Fort Collins. You don't have to go far, right? There's plenty of them in Fort Collins. I don't think you see that in a pop-up situation. You'll see sort of like a food truck, right? Like or a restaurant that already has that frontage, maybe open up the back wall for a day and serve out there. But I'm not. I think we should pilot this. I'm not advocating for permanent change day one. I think we should see what it feels like and what it looks like. Because some of the uses, I mean, I think all the photos are the same. A lot of the photos are that alley that is, what's that, First and Second and Grand to Ivinson. It's a great candidate for this sort of thing, in my opinion. it also is full of trash all the time, and litter, frankly. I mean, it is, I once, in an early Main Street conversation about this, I went to that alley, and a person walked out of an establishment, threw up into the alley, and then went and fell asleep somewhere. So I think there are hurdles, right? And but I think it's a cool idea. I think it's something we ought to consider real seriously. And I like the approach of trying a pilot. I mean, let's just see what happens. The survey may be a great way. Downtown business owner survey may be a great way to sort of like pinpoint where we should try. You might find a place that has significantly more support than another. And maybe that's a reason enough to pick a spot. So, but yeah, thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. All right, anybody else? All right, we'll turn this to the public then. If there's a member of the public that wishes to speak to this work session, now's your shot. Raise your hand on Zoom or come forward in the room. You have 3 minutes. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Council, anything before we close the work session? All right, staff, do you feel like you got what you needed out of that? Okay. All right. So we are going to go ahead and close that work session, Council. We're going to move on then to our next work session, which is short-term rentals. And for this one, Mr. Sheedy, welcome. Appreciate you being here.
Honorable Mayor, Council, give me a moment here and I'll pull up
Yeah,
the
you take your
PowerPoint.
time. I jumped into that pretty quickly. But we've got 3 work sessions, so I figured I got to be on it.
Absolutely, and I will try to respect y'all's time as much as possible on this.
You take all the time you need.
So tonight I was tasked with discussing short-term rentals with you all. Short-term rentals have kind of been a hot topic amongst governing organizations across the country. Some communities have struggled with them immensely for various reasons. Generally, those communities are related to high tourism and other areas that just struggle with housing just in general. But I'll just say, as we're moving forward, Laramie's in a good position right now. This is kind of a more proactive session than it is a reactive in a lot of ways, which puts us in a really great position. As always, we want to connect this with the council goals, and if you all remember, goal number 4, milestone B, investigate how currently unused tools might improve housing supply and attainability. I think short-term rentals certainly do impact our housing supply within Laramie. How much is kind of up to debate at the moment, so. As y'all remember, you guys passed a rental housing ordinance in January 4th, 2022. As we know, this is a particularly competitive rental market within Laramie due to our educational institutions and a pretty high transient population. However, in those ordinance, short-term rentals were specifically exempt. So any short-term rental does not have to register as a normal rental within Laramie and is not subject to the same rules and regulations that code implies. First off, I guess we should probably go over what short-term rentals are in the first place. Short-term rentals are a rental of all or part of a residential dwelling unit, usually for a period of less than a month. This is not our definition. This is a definition that is commonly used amongst the planning community. But I do want to point out that the part about either all or part of a unit. So you can rent out the entire house, or you can just rent out a bedroom. And that does kind of complicate things a little bit when we're looking through this. When we're looking at how these things are booked, they're generally going through things like Airbnbs, VRBOs, HipCamp, even like private sites, those sort of things. That being said, it is very hard to get information from these organizations. They are very tight-lipped about what they're doing, what rentals are part of their organization and which are not. And so it makes it very hard to regulate and kind of get a pulse on what's going on in our community. However, we do have some information. There are organizations who are kind of paying attention to this more than others, and there are certainly contractors who specify in this. We have some of that information here tonight that we got courtesy of Visit Laramie, but there's certainly more that we can look into. Kind of looking into this, what drives the short-term rental market? Generally speaking, it's taking advantage of a high tourism area or high tourism times of year. Laramie, I wouldn't say is a particularly strong short-term rental community, but not a weak one either. We're generally between a 30 and 40% occupancy rate here. So there are some market factors that would drive somebody to come into this. And this isn't speaking for, you know, every single unit. This is just an average. So there are some units that have 100% occupancy rate, and there's others that do not. Often, these rentals generate more revenue than a typical rental. On average, on average in Albany County, it's about $136 per day to rent one of these, which is generally, depending on the type of unit you have, significantly more than you would get in a month from a normal rental. And then there's also personal reasons why people enter the short-term rental economy. There's typically less risk involved to your property. People are coming in and out, less wear and tear. And sometimes it's just as simple as, it's an inherited property that's underutilized. It's a second home. They have extra space on their property that they want to add something on that they can have a little bit of extra revenue throughout the year. So kind of coming to this, does Laramie regulate short-term rentals at all? The short answer is we do not. There are currently no specific zoning regulations that manage short-term rentals. However, we do have regulations on units, household requirements, like how many people, unrelated people, can live in a dwelling, as well as things like regulations on accessory buildings and those sort of things. That's generally what we go on if a complaint comes up, and we do have to do a zoning violation. These are the kind of areas that we focus on within code to enforce. However, again, there's no short-term specific rentals. So if a rental ordinance, if a neighbor calls and complains about, the people who are coming in and out of the short-term of the rental next to them, there's very little we can do. So are short-term rentals an issue within Laramie? I think it warrants a deeper dive. However, kind of on the surface, this is kind of the information we've gotten from various consultants. So there's estimated to be around 150 properties listed within the city limits. Some of these properties are cross-listed in multiple sites, so that also makes it difficult to count. But also, about 89% of these are the entire unit. So I talked about you can rent out just a room. A very, very small percentage of that is happening within Laramie. It is usually the entire house, the entire apartment, whatever. There can also be, nuisance violations that come up. Generally, we hear about things like parking, noise, safety concerns, who's coming in and out of my neighborhood. But ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, the biggest concern I think today is how does this affect our housing? And it's undeniable that it is a competition for limited housing. I think kind of what's more up for debate is how much competition is it? How big of an issue is it? So kind of going into this, I wanted to go over quickly what are other communities doing. I'll just say, for the most part, we're seeing people in the northwest portion of the state, those communities in the northwest portion of the state, dealing with this in a much more substantive way than other people in the state, other communities in the state. And that's because, there's a huge tourism community. There's not a huge surplus of housing and those sort of things. So kind of the first one we looked at was Pinedale. Pinedale does have annual registration requirements. This does lead to life safety inspections. So there's things that are required in there, like a functional smoke or carbon monoxide detector, a fire extinguisher, compliant means of egress in case of emergency. This also shows that there's proof of insurance there. Just because these are requirements, it's not to say that they are not, they don't already have these or they're not in compliance. A lot of times Airbnb or whichever hosting organization does require some of these things anyways. But on top of that, they've gone and talked about, the form, what is allowed within city limits and what isn't. And so they said that it's not permitted to have any outdoor types of short-term rentals, so no tents, campers, RVs, any of that sort of thing. There's only one permit allowed per property, and that capacity-wise, there can't be more than 10 guests. There are parking requirements, and then like safety things like, display of property information, like the short-term rental license, contact information, those sort of things. It is also prohibited in certain zoning districts, and so those are pretty common ways to go about regulating these. We also looked at Cody, Wyoming, again, a community in the northwest of the state, and you're going to see it's pretty similar. There's a lot of just standard things that communities do. The annual rental registration is part of that. That has the life safety inspection with proof of insurance. They go about capacity slightly different, looking at the amount of bedrooms within a unit to determine how many people can rent it. There's slightly more aggressive parking requirements associated with that. Each zoning district is very specific for them in regards to how many people are allowed into it, what the rental unit looks like as far as, can it be can it be a 5-bedroom house, or does it have to be something smaller, those sort of things. And like I said, there are other people in the state, we're in good company, that don't regulate it at all. If we look at cities like Rock Springs, Cheyenne, Casper, Sheridan, Gillette, they enforce their zoning much the same way that we do. So kind of as we're moving forward with this and kind of thinking about what direction we want to go with it, if we want to go in any direction with this, we kind of have to determine what is our objective. So are we trying to address safety concerns? Are we trying to address neighborhood character? Are we protecting our limited housing supply? Are we ensuring that an operator is present to address issues quickly? Are we creating parity in our regulations? Are we trying to make sure that the rental housing ordinance, our short-term rentals, come up to the same standards as our long-term rentals? Or are we regulating our hotels and our short-term rentals in roughly the same way? So kind of as we move forward, I do think it would behoove us to think about that. Kind of our next moves forward would be, if we decided to implement any sort of code directly addressing this, the first thing would kind of get a better idea of what's going on the ground. So probably contracting a short-term rental monitoring company such as Granicus, Decker Technologies. There's a lot of them out there that could certainly help us determine what is actually going on the ground. Unfortunately, in our experience with Airbnb, we're not going to get it from them. And that's not just because we're a small town. Places like New York have equally as difficult a time. Then we can move on to something like a registration to get actually, hey, these are the properties that are endeavoring in short-term rentals. We could focus on short-term rentals in pre-approved areas. And then we could establish various regulations according to what our concerns are with them, including owner occupancy requirements or, limiting it to specific zoning districts. But yeah, I'm here for any other questions.
Thank you. Councilor Newman.
My first question is, what's the city of Laramie's definition of a short-term rental?
We don't currently have a specific definition for that, so we just kind of go to the industry standard.
I was hoping you would say that, because now the Brandon in me just found a loophole for every rental in Laramie. And I can just classify it as short-term rental now. I don't have to come to the city and get all the paperwork and all that stuff, because if we don't have something in place, we don't have anything to stand on. Right, and yeah, we can use industry standard, but if we don't have something in place within our regs, that can cause a huge problem. I will tell you that my hometown passed this in 2018, and I think I looked up theirs. There's a lot that goes into this that we should probably be discussing, but I think this is something that we need to have. If this is something that we are regulating per se, our long-term rentals, why aren't we doing the short-term rentals? Airbnb, all those companies don't work with cities very well. However, it took me 27 seconds to tell you there's 127 rental properties that I can rent this weekend in Laramie. So yeah, would it take some staff time? Absolutely. But could we do it? I think so. And so whether it's, I've looked up, cities make them get some sort of business license, it's not the right term to use, but or a short-term rental, but this is something that we truly need to start looking at, because I have a feeling that these loopholes are going to start popping up more and more and more, and that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Councilor Newman, and I think we've already seen some of that. I would note, though, that while we don't have a short-term rentals definition, our rental regulation does outline what transient lodging is, and that would be rented less than 30 consecutive days, and it does outline who is required to license, which is more than 90. So there is some sort of like guardrail on one end, but your point is taken just the same. So, other questions, council members? Vice Mayor, please.
I was just going to say that in the industry, Airbnb and VRBO, their definition of short-term rental is 30 days or less. So that fits with ours. And I have a short-term rental, and I started it 4 years ago. And the first thing I did was to inquire about licensure and what I needed, and I was surprised to find out that not only did I need it, but I kind of wanted it, as part of my LLC. And I was not able to really get that. It was just not in the category. So I think this is a good direction for us to be exploring and looking at. There have been assertions in some of the housing groups I'm working in that when we implemented minimum safety standards for our long-term rentals, that many of them went to short-term rental to bypass that. Now, I don't know how true that is, because it's only anecdotal. It's 2 units on my block or this and that. So I'd be very interested if we could contract with someone to really get some accurate information, because the industry, it's not to their advantage because they have faced a lot of major regulation, especially in California, San Francisco, other cities. And so by their blocking that information, it makes it harder for you to implement regulations. So for us to contract to get a better handle on it, I really would like to answer that assertion to find out, is it valid that people are shifting? Why did I shift? We've had rented long-term, and they just never left. So we wanted it available for family and other people, and I like the flexibility of it. So we went with that. So anyway.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Pierce and then Councilor Richardson. Oh, please, Mr. Sheedy.
Sorry, and I do want to point out this, because we did hear that, certainly, in the clerk's office when the rental registry came out, that, oh, well, I'll just switch it over to a short-term rental. That being said, sometimes we do have to have faith in the invisible hand of the market. Something that doesn't meet basic safety standards may not be as, sellable in the short-term rental economy as it would be to a student. Short-term rentals are a lot of work. And it's not just, like set it and forget it, like sometimes we're seeing with some of our normal rentals in town, so.
Thank you. Councilor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. If this presentation could be shared, I don't see it on our agenda.
I didn't see it.
And if we could share that, not only with this council, but the future council, considering there's probably going to be discussions forthcoming, that would be great. And my second question has to do with one of your slides. Early on in the presentation, was it 136 a night for short-term rentals, or is that our average?
I think it was the average.
Was that our average for hotel occupancy? I was wanting to just double check what.
It's on that side, yeah.
So it's got to be an average, because the ones I looked up was, the cheapest was $75, and they went well over $300 per night. So that has to be the average.
I wrote down 136 per day.
Yeah.
Per day.
Yeah, right
For
there,
short.
right here in the middle.
That has to be the average.
It's right there in the middle.
Mayor, through you, and that is for Albany County
Yep.
as a whole. So there's places like Centennial, Albany, that may be a little bit higher than what we'd see here specifically, but that is a rough average per day provided by Visit Laramie.
So do we know what our average rate is on a hotel occupancy? Could that be higher than our average rate for hotel occupancy?
Yeah, it sure could be.
Yeah, okay. Just curious, I think we need a few comparators added to that. So that's good, that's surprisingly high to me, but what do I know? I don't know. And we're just happy to get rid of people at my house. I don't want anybody coming.
All right, we'll go to Councilor Richardson, then Councilor Shumway.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. Initially, I had really thought that contracting someone to look at this more closely would be a good idea, but I think in searching, we all seem to fall around like 130, 150, and so I guess I would want to know what the cost of that would be and what more we would gain from contracting other than just the number of units we have. And I think if we have a ballpark, maybe that's not needed unless there's some additional supports they can offer in that exploration. In thinking about this and in hearing this presentation, and thank you, Joseph, for presenting, I am thinking about that parity piece. If the safety of people who live in Laramie is important and we are requiring things like egress windows, that same safety should be, I think, extended to visitors or anyone who's sleeping in a unit overnight. And so that is something that's kind of top of mind for me. And then just, again, housing access is important. But regardless, I mean, I think if we made the rental to the short-term to long-term rentals, that parity there, then perhaps we would see what the impacts would be yeah, that parity and the safety piece to me are what are most interesting. I don't know if there's anything we could do to ensure that those, those short terms can stay short terms. And so the housing access is important, but I'm not sure what the fix would be to increase the numbers of units.
Thank you, Councilor Richardson. Councilor Shumway, and then Councilor O'Doherty.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think most of us have probably participated in the Airbnb and the VRBO market, and so we're generally, what I see is, because you're paying a premium, you're paying more than you would for a typical rental per day. There's higher expectation, and I think the invisible hand. Let's say Airbnb. They are very conscious about making sure that health and safety are there, because they don't want to have to deal with somebody that is in this market that's lax in taking care of the people that participate. I think we're going down a road that doesn't need, the invisible hand takes care of it. And I think once we get, past the long-term rental, the short-term rental, the next thing is going to be single-family units and, residential things. It just, there's no end to it. And I don't think that we have to be involved, as we are so involved in trying to make corrections where the people that want to keep their businesses viable have an interest in making sure that especially in short-term rentals, they can't continue in business if the reports keep coming back that this place is a dump and we're paying twice as much as we would if we just stayed at a nice hotel. I think that we're probably going down a road that we need to back off and see, if Casper and Cheyenne and other places feel like that they need to jump into it, let's have that discussion as a group, not just do it because Pinedale does it.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor O'Doherty.
I want to point out the reason I was for the rental ordinance in the first place was safety. And if somebody is in a basement apartment, whether it's an Airbnb or a non-transient rental, I want them to be able to get out. And I suspect the Airbnbs will already comply, but I think having the very basic, it applies to everybody. And in case anybody was listening and trying to use the loophole that Councilor Newman thought he found, it's defined in the rental ordinance that transient means a house, room, or suite of rooms which is occupied not as a principal residence by persons for periods of less than 30 consecutive days. So I think our rental ordinance right now takes care of the problem or loophole that you just found, but I'd be happy to require them all to comply to basic health and safety standards, and then if that did take apartments out of the rental market because we passed the rental ordinance, maybe they would come back in, and that would be a good reason. I just think, after those fires in Boulder County, and we don't have a megalopolis of fire departments. We have our one fire department here and our volunteers. There's no way we could activate that fast. And if something hits at night, a grass fire, I want people to be able to get out of the apartment. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Councilor. Vice Mayor, did you have something to add there?
I did. I agree with Councilor Shumway in that these companies do require you to verify fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, and they encourage you to have a first aid kit. They do not require egress. That is not, and if you look at many of the Airbnb rentals in Laramie, many of them are basement apartments. And those are the runs going for between $75 and $95 per night. And they do not have egress. So there is safety issue, and that is why we have closed ours down right now until we can get our egress window put in.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Gabriel, please.
Thanks, Mayor. Councilor Shumway stole a lot of my thunder here, but in light of what the Vice Mayor has just said, safety certainly a big concern, but I'm wondering, are we, looking to solve a problem that doesn't exist? And for the most part, I think there was a neighbor of mine just about 6 months ago that went down south and did a bunch of rentals. And so people were coming and going all the time. No problem whatsoever. So, I'm not quite sure what we're trying to solve here, other than just making sure that these places are safe for residents to rent. But for the most part, I think, if the big cities like Cheyenne and Casper are not regulating the short-term rentals, I'm not sure, what we're getting after. But of course, this is going to be for future councils and not me. Thank you.
Councilor Gabriel, I'm trying to stay quiet for the same reason. Vice Mayor and then Councilor Newman.
I agree. I don't want to start chasing a problem that doesn't exist. But I'm very curious if there's a way that we can find out some sort of information that informs us about the impact of short-term rental on our rental market. And I would like to know that information because I hear that assertion often. And I'm wondering, is that true? Isn't it true? In other cities that are more tourist destinations, such as Steamboat, they have been forced to implement. Why? Because there was a problem. And they had people who could not find housing, and it was exceeding the limits. And so they did have a problem. And I guess my question would be, do we have a problem? Is this impacting significantly availability of housing? Or, it's kind of erratic, the demand. And so are people opening them, and then the demand's not there. And so if there was a way for us to determine, is there really an impact, or is the impact minimal? And is it a benefit that we offer to people who want to visit their kids at the university or something like that?
Thank you. Councilor Newman and Joseph, just raise your hand if you want to shoot in at any point. I'm just rolling with the questions right now. So,
Mr. Mayor, through you, I'm not sure if that was a rhetorical question or not, but I'll go with it. I think there's certainly ways that we can look into it, and it does warrant probably a deeper dive and before we jump into anything with both feet. It is really hard to say because the communities that have really seen the highest impact have been these tourist communities that have like very small amount of housing to even begin with, and then it all gets sucked away anyways. And so I think it's hard to say one way or another just off here, but it does warrant a little bit more investigation, certainly.
Thank you. Councilor Newman.
Obviously, we had a problem, so we did the rental ordinance, right? I am on page 7, and I just did a Google search. I didn't go to anybody's page. I'm on page 7, and I've already lost count of how many of these rentals don't have egress windows. So if we're going to do it for one group, we need to do it for all the groups. And I think safety is the biggest thing. Vice Mayor was right. A lot of these are basement apartments that they're just short-term rentals, and it would be a good study to see, and I don't know who or how this could happen, how many of them were not short-term rentals before we had some sort of rental ordinance. So do we have a problem? It's probably not as big as other cities across the nation even, but we do have one because, like I said, I've already lost count, and that kind of scares me, to be honest. So,
thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think to add to some of that data collection, I think we need to have an understanding, and I've never stayed in an Airbnb or a whatever all the other names are, but if we could have a understanding of what their requirements are and do some sort of a comparison of the different providers and the different establishments that have these requirements, and then somehow, and I don't even know if it's possible, get a number or an idea of, like, if I personally could just put an ad that says I have a bedroom for sale, for rent, not sale, but a bedroom for rent, do I even need to be affiliated with anybody or anything? And what sort of percentage, that would be in our community, just like, hey, I've got a bedroom, come in.
Because you see that a lot on game plays too.
Yeah, I mean, something I certainly wouldn't do, but maybe people do. I don't know. I mean, it'd be nice to know. Impossible to collect the data, perhaps, but.
Thank you,
Anyway.
Councilor Pierce. Councilor Shumway?
Thank you again, Your Honor. I was able to go to a booth in Tampa, Florida, with the National League of Cities, where they talked about the impact that Airbnb, VRBO, and these other short-term leasing companies have made, and they said it's a huge impact. They said it's similar. It's interesting, the city of Laramie does not regulate, as far as I understand, Uber and Lyft, but they do regulate taxis, and the taxis are being run out of business. And their goal with these short-term leases, Airbnb, et cetera, is to fill the gap of the market that's being, for people coming in and saying, I want to have something that is accessible and reasonable, but obviously at a higher price than what they would have if they stayed at a hotel. I don't know that we're going to run long-term rentals out of business with this. Obviously, we're not with only 187, but I do believe that there is a lot of pressure to make sure that the short-term lease is at a higher quality, and they have to face safety, or the clients that go to them are not going to go back, and they're going to have. They have a place where you can go into Airbnb and you can read all of the comments that people leave. And if they say it's a death trap because there's no way to get out of the building, they're going to go somewhere else and find something that's reasonable and safe. So again, their goal is to make a huge impact in the market, and they will only expand if it's reasonable and safe. And I think that that's what they're going to do. Now, obviously, there's always room for crazy things, which I think you mentioned. We can't do tents. We can't do, things like that. But they can do, I've seen where you can go into a place and just stay at a hostel where there's one bathroom at the end of the hall. And so there's a lot of different things that we can do, and I think we need to realize that if someone's staying at a place for $39 a night, it's not going to have all the amenities that something with $300 a night is going to have. So the customer has to also look at this and say, I'm going to read and see if this is where I want to stay, if it's something that would be safe and good for my family to be there, and if they don't, they probably will stay at the hotel motel system that we already have in place.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? Micah, go ahead.
I was going to kind of reiterate what I already said, so I don't need to speak again.
You got it. Anyone else? Vice Mayor?
I would say that in the 4 years that people stayed, I have all 5-star reviews, and I never had a single person question there was not an egress exit. And I became educated about the importance of that through our work session with Chief Johnson and the fire department, and that caused me alarm. But I've never had a person think about it. And so, and they love the place. Just glowing reviews, but no one thought about the safety of getting out. I have smoke detectors in each room. I have all the other stuff, but I do not have an egress window. And I didn't think about it until we had that work session last year.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yeah, I think counselors spend a lot more time thinking about egress windows than your average person. And I think it's one of those things, on a more serious note, I think it's one of those things you don't think about until you need it, right?
Right.
If it is dirty, if it is in a neighborhood that you wouldn't want to stay in, but you can't tell from the photos, those are the things that you find in a review. And I think in a lot of ways, these online services do a great job of sort of like adding transparency to the market, which makes this distinctly different than the long-term rental market, where there's not as much transparency amongst your options, right? So that does make this a bit of a different conversation, but I do think sort of, nobody thinks about their egress window when they check into their Airbnb, right? They just look to see if like the towels are clean and the things you look at, right? But the thing that is sticking in my mind is folks who have decided to help the city solve the housing problem that we have are not playing by the same, they're playing by more strict rules than folks who opted out of that and took the easy way out. And I can see how folks might have taken that short-term rental option initially and thought, yeah, I'm going to keep making money on it while I get my egress window, right? But we're a couple years into that, and we're sort of at the tail end of that being an option. And in my mind, not that it's really going to matter when this comes to a vote, but in my mind, I think this there should be some consideration of those unique features that make it different than long-term rentals. But I do think that the health and safety standards having parity amongst the type of units, I think makes a lot of sense, right? You should be able to get out of the place if you need to get out of the place. That feels really basic. And we have another work session about what exactly that means coming right up. But I do think that the parity makes a lot of sense. And then I think, Joseph, you had one question about, I think that the sort of neighborhood character has more bearing in a lot of other communities, Cody, Pinedale, those sort of places that are like mostly single family, like primary residence for the owner, right? That is just not the case here, right? The majority are rentals already. I live in like a residential part of town. Half my block is still rentals, yeah. Right? And so I think when you look at VRBO or Airbnb or something, they're largely sort of like fenced geographically around the university, right? Like that's where people want to stay when they're here. So I imagine more viable short-term rentals are around the university, probably around WyoTech, near downtown, those sort of things. But you don't find them in Indian Hills or whatever, right? There's just not as many. So that was rambling, so forgive me for that, but that's my take on it. Anybody else before we go to the public? Great. All right, we'll turn this over to the public. If anybody would like to speak to the council on this item, go ahead and come forward or raise your hand on the Zoom call. Please. We will just need your name, of course. You'll have 3 minutes.
Chris Stratton, Laramie 24/7. Looking at this in aspects towards exactly what Newman had said, there is definitely a little bit of a loophole that can be played with. The big one that I am curious on in the short-term rental lens is the numerous sketchy hotels that have switched into not being a hotel or a motel, but they are now a monthly rental. Is that a loophole for them to do the same thing? Because looking at a lot of the rentals that are in town, most of those units don't have anything for cooking, anything for anything, but they are being used as a key point of, I can't afford a place, so I need to go here. And coming from people who drive taxi and are dropping people off at storage units in town that have electricity, and they just tell them to turn off their hot plates whenever they leave. I think it would be a really good idea to look at short-term rentals and the feasibility of are they livable, et cetera, because there's a lot of people that can't afford the $800 a month that we're asking for apartments now, yet they may be living in a storage shed because that's the only options that are available to them. On the end of being able to do this and the comments that have been made about, well, Cheyenne doesn't do it. Well, Cheyenne doesn't do anything. All that they're doing is you can go sue. And there's, lots of people that state that's where we need to be. But we've took the steps that we have done to make it a better place. You can relist an Airbnb anytime that you want to. There's also Craigslist. Unfortunately, that doesn't get you the greatest place in the world, but I'm sure that if you ran Craigslist, you could find a room to rent rather quickly, and it's probably not going to be the greatest, but it's better than trying to sleep on the streets. I definitely think that you guys should look into adding on so that you're able to do the protections that you have with the rental agreement or with the rental property ends for everybody. It's definitely a way for you to go. I think that would be very beneficial for anybody that's having to rent in this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Councilors, just before we close out, please, Councilor Newman.
I just wanted to make it public that I don't own one of these, so I've stayed at a bunch, and I will tell you I have never looked at a window when I went to one by any means. So kind of what the vice mayor said, sometimes you stay in some pretty crappy ones too, just because it's the only one available. And I've had to deal with that sometimes too.
Thank you, Councilor. All right, we're going to go ahead and close that work session. Councilors, anybody need a break before we hop into the next one? Are you guys okay?
I'm going to take a break.
Okay, 5 minutes, councilors.
I just emailed you the one that I referenced from my hometown.
It's from basements under LMC 8 point, well, I don't need to read all that for you. You guys know that part. So Fire Chief Johnson, turning it over to you. Thank you for being here, and wait until the end.
Thank you. Okay. Honorable Mayor, members of council, I guess I'll get this topic kicked off for us tonight. Sounds like we've already kind of broached the subject in an earlier work session. With us tonight are Derek Teeney from planning, Lucas Witt, code enforcement from planning, Dennis Johnson, fire marshal, and myself. Kind of want to talk, I think the reason we're having this work session or this discussion tonight, and I think it's good. I know we have some members of the public here, and I know we have a landlord here, and I know we have a contractor, so it's going to be good to hear their perspective on the challenges that we're facing. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. We have fielded, I think the reason we're here tonight, I asked myself a question, how do we end up here? We had a robust rental housing, trying to cover the basic health and safety standards of rental. The emergency escape, I believe it's K, Section K, was addressed in it. And it's more than just basements. It's escape from all areas, the sleeping areas. So how did we get here? It's like we've been fielding questions. I believe the council's fielded questions. I believe the city manager has fielded questions. I know our building department's fielding questions. Myself is fielding questions. So there's a lot of questions out in the public, a lot of questions. And I get to looking at all of those questions, and I was asked to write a memo to the council. And I sent the memo. It was dated November 19th to the council. And really, the summary of that memo is when we talk about the rental ordinance, we're specifically talking about rental properties. We're not talking about new construction. We're not talking about remodels that are going through a building permit process. We're not talking about replacing existing windows. We're talking about the rental ordinance for rentals. So on those other areas, we're kind of solid because we fall under the ICC code series, and we have reference to a lot of things where questions that come up, we can get in, our code people can get into the narratives of the code and get into a lot more information. Under the municipal code that was adopted, it's specific to, and that's all we have to reference as far as going into the rental to look at the egress section K. And we all know it says it's 5.7 feet. It gives minimum dimensions, width and height, and it gives a minimum dimension from a finished floor. You know, we field questions about, well, what's the finished floor? What's the grade from outside? What if I have stairs? What if I have a platform? What if they're permanently affixed? What if they're movable? Really, all we have is the municipal code with the direction of the 5.7 square feet with minimum, there's a minimum width and height, and then a minimum height from the floor. So that's kind of challenging for us when we're dealing with code questions on these issues. We're not really here tonight prepared to make any kind of recommendations. I'm here tonight to talk about the challenges we're facing. I've been asked, one of the things that's kind of awkward is I've been contacted by some members of the public wanting a position, a city staff member, which I am, fire chief, to come and basically lobby a certain code, well, this needs to change or that needs to change. And really that's kind of awkward because the council went through a process where they had 3 readings, public hearings, and we've adopted. And my job's to follow what the council has directed me to do. And that's really where I sit right now. Right now, we don't really address, we have those minimum standards of the opening, but we don't have any information to refer to and address in steps, ladders, window wells, details of window wells, under decks, cantilevers coming out, exceptions from the grade floor, if there's any exceptions for that we could consider. So that's kind of an overview of the challenges we face, because what we refer to as a municipal code that does not reference any other code. Does that make sense? That doesn't reference the ICC series. It's been brought to my attention. State of Wisconsin has their code that they've adopted. I've looked at it. The ICC has codes that are whether you're looking at the fire code or the building code or a maintenance code or a residential code, they all are interconnected and they all reference things. So with that being said, I kind of am up here to introduce the topic for discussion. I do have our code people here. I'd like to open the floor for them to come up and talk. Lucas could take the stand and talk about what he's had to deal with and some of the challenges. And then I guess we'd be ready for questions. So.
Thank you, Chief. Lucas, go ahead and come on up. Thank you. We appreciate you being here.
Honorable Mayor, Council. So just briefly, once the ordinance was adopted, we fielded a lot of questions. We did a lot of consults, on-site consults. People, building owners, where, they had a specific incidence where, my window's this high, my window's this size, what can we do to accommodate? We had a lot of people, especially the ordinance references heights, and we got into a lot of discussion as far as, the ordinance very clear, 44 inches from the ground or from the finished floor. And, we got a lot, well, mine's only an inch off. Mine's only 2 inches off. And it just became to a point where, we wanted to work with people, but there's no way for us to stay consistent. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be as consistent as we can for the public. So there's, people asked about, and Chief brought it up, people want to put in a permanent step. What if I attach a step this size? Will that work? Well, again, if we allow it for somebody with an inch off the ground, how can we, people are just going to keep going and keep going. So it's a tough one for us. But at the same time, that's what was adopted. That's what we're trying to follow. And it's, now that we're getting close, and you brought it up, Mayor, now that we're getting close, and people that may or may not have procrastinated are now trying to figure out ways to get things remedied in a hurry. And I'm sure contractors can attest. We have one in the audience tonight. They've been booked out for a while. That's, you call me 2 weeks in advance, it's probably not going to happen. So those are the kind of the things that we're seeing and that we're running into. So if you guys have any questions, I'm open to any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Witt. Please, Councilor Doherty, have at it.
I have a question, and maybe nobody can answer this, but why is the height requirement in the code? What do firefighters encounter such that height is specified in the code? Can anybody answer that here, or would I have to go to the people that write the code? I'll just add, there was no wiggle room when it came to putting solar panels on my house. The code said I had to leave 3 feet, and I'm still grouchy about that because I lost like 18% of my capacity. So, there was no wiggle room there because it's a safety thing. And so I'm just trying to figure out why is that height restriction there? Thanks.
Yeah, Mayor, through you. I haven't gone in specifically to that code. That one's been around for a while. I could go into and look and see why it was adopted. A lot of these codes, they have councils for these that they meet for years. We just adopted the 24 code, and they've been looking at the 27 code changes for a couple years now. So there's people constantly changing, and we'll get a code that comes in, in one code cycle, and it'll come back out the next, and then it'll come back in because somebody proposed something. So specifically that code, I'm not sure why the 44 inches height. Maybe Chief Johnson can answer that. I'm not sure.
See if we can get an answer here. Thanks for being here.
Mayor and Council, to the best of my knowledge, and I would just speculate that it is a reasonable height for kids to climb out of. I mean, it's there's no. I would have to dive back into why they did that as well. So,
thank you.
Okay,
thanks. Councilor Doherty, did you have any follow up there?
Well, that's the root of my question. Like, it's put in there for a reason. And since we don't seem to know the reason, and I don't go running into burning buildings, I don't know, what are the ramifications of changing that requirement. And we're very rigid about some things, like I told you, so we should be consistent with code.
Thank you. Other questions, council members? Councilor Richardson, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm curious from the fire chief's perspective to the question of ramifications. What would be the ramifications of allowing for ladders? Do you see any permanent ladders or permanent kind of steps, that sort of thing? Any reason that would be detrimental?
To the chief, if you've got an answer. Anybody that has an answer is welcome.
Anybody, yes.
Honorable Mayor, through you, Councilor Richardson, if I understand the question, I'd have to have it rephrased. I couldn't.
Can you repeat your question, Councilor?
Sorry, sure. We're kind of exploring this idea of perhaps having a permanent fixture, a permanent step or ladder or something fixture. Is there any reason that would not be a good idea from your perspective in terms of safety?
Through you, Mayor, I believe the main goal is to be able to get people out safely. And there are standards that are set that describe the dimensions of ladders and stuff when you get into the ICC series. Those references aren't available through the municipal code. I don't know if I answered your question, but I believe that yes, there are things that can be done to make, safe egress. So.
Can I follow up with Mayor?
Please.
So those kind of the standards around what that permanent stair or ladder fixture would be are in the other code. So if we were to adopt something saying, ensuring that those standards were used when you were putting in the permanent stair, that then could be a safe exit from your perspective?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I wasn't making recommendations for code changes tonight, because we don't really write code. We adopt what's been researched, and if I could speak to the 44 inch, where exactly did that measurement come from? I think we're speaking from assumptions without diving into code commentary and finding out exactly where do they. At some point it's too far, and so they come up with a line somewhere. It's the same with the steps, stairs, all that stuff is researched heavily through the code series that we adopt. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but.
No, you are, and I think I don't think you're just answering my question of is it safe? I don't take that as a recommendation one way or the other from you. I just want to get your perspective, so I sure appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. City Manager.
Mayor and Council, I just wanted to clarify, maybe this is what Dennis is coming up to address. We're using a lot of terms loosely, and I think it might be good to be more succinct in the terms we're using. When talking about the city's rental housing ordinance, Sometimes staff also refer to ordinance as the municipal code, right? So I think for purposes of making a clear conversation tonight, it might be helpful if we refer to the rental housing ordinance as the ordinance. The section that we're talking about tonight is section K, and this kind of gets to Councilor Richardson's question. Section K doesn't talk about steps. It doesn't talk about ladders. In fact, there's nothing in the rental housing ordinance, I'm fairly certain, that talks about steps or ladders. It just says in section K that the egress window needs to be of a certain height and 44 inches from the floor. I think where we have gotten into conversation amongst counselors and staff in the code division about steps and ladders and whether they're fixed to the wall and permanent or not fixed to the wall and permanent is when people are finding under section K that they exceed 44 inches. And so they're trying to find, a practical man's solution to the issue. But from a staff standpoint, section K was an excerpt the council adopted from the International Residential Code, and staff have no means to enforce anything other than that or to grant any exception at this point, like fixed ladders or steps or anything like that. Chief Johnson, I think, is right to say we're not in a position tonight to make a recommendation on what the fix is. Is it an appeals process? Is it a form of fixed ladder or stair? And if so, what construction, would be recommended for that ladder or stair? We're just not ready for that yet. We could certainly go and look for that kind of information if that's what you'd like. So ordinance is one term, and then when we refer to code, I think we want to be careful to note that we're referring to the ICC series, International Code Series. Dennis?
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
Mayor and Council, she's correct. I mean, the ordinance is a standalone ordinance, but it does reflect some of all we have is our codes to fall back on. And these are codes that are written to a bare minimum standard. And so when it comes to the 44 inches, it says a maximum of 44 inches from the finished floor. So it can be below that, just no more than that, so.
And when it's more than that, that's when folks are coming to us and saying, geez, I'm 46 inches from the floor.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, okay, we appreciate it. Yeah, that's quite clear. Councilor Newman?
Only because I wanted to know where the 44 inches came from, so I looked it up. So this dimension is considered the optimal height for most adults to easily exit through in an emergency, while allowing and taking into account the potential need for a firefighter to access the space through the window, if necessary. And then it goes on to say everything that the city manager said, so she stole my thunder, but that's okay. But that's what it says. So easily for an adult and enough room for a firefighter.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gabriel?
That was going to be my point, and to Lucas, thinking about a fire person getting into a building, right? That has to be adequate for that individual, and I'm sure that has a lot to what Councilor Newman just talked about.
Yeah, Mayor, through you, that's as far as the size, the minimum size, that plays a large part. Obviously, people getting out, but they do, I mean, they can attest to this, but they're going to be able to get in when they need to, but for ease for them, there you have apparatuses and everything on, so they've figured out a size for them to be able to get in if need be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Newman, you had one other question, I think.
Well, I just have a comment. I'll wait until after.
Okay, cool. Any other questions, council members? Councilor Doherty, please.
So one of my concerns is a firefighter supposed to know how big a drop there's going to be when they go into this window? But I guess they don't know whether it's a bedroom or another room, so that's going to be the case no matter what. You guys don't just drop off into black holes, I guess.
Or smoke.
Thanks. Okay, other questions, please. Councilor Shumway.
I know we're talking about rental, Schedule K or whatever it is for rentals, but my question is this. are we ignoring the 9,000 residential homes that have already exist? Or is there a schedule for us to go in and inspect the 9,000 residential homes in the city of Laramie? Have we even approached that yet?
Mayor, through you, to my knowledge, no, we have not. The ordinance is strictly for the rental side.
Thank you. Other questions, council members? Councilor Doherty?
Can I just mention to get insurance, to get occupancy permits and things like that? You know, for something to be called a bedroom, it has to have an egress window when you're buying a house. Things like that to get a mortgage. So I'm not as concerned about the permanent residents.
Thank you. Other questions, council members? Going to give staff just a minute to see if anything's coming. Okay. All right. No other questions. I had offered, Mr. Glass had requested a little extra time to speak, so I'm going to recognize him now for 5 minutes. He may have, city manager, while Mr. Glass is coming on up.
Sorry,
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Glass. I'd asked the fire chief if he would maybe address the issue of firefighters getting into buildings in emergency situations. Simply because, and Dan will talk to it, sure, they'd love to come in an existing opening, but I'll let Dan give you the eloquent answer, but the non-eloquent, non-fire answer is they'll cut a hole in your house to come save you if the hole that exists is too small. So I want to maybe minimize that this is some convenience for firefighters. I think that this code requirement, the intent of it largely is to let people get out if fire hasn't gotten there yet. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes.
And Mr. Glass, thank you for a pause there.
And the city manager Jordan's correct. In the code series, in the municipal code, anything I reference, it's always called egress, ingress. So the ingress is basically for us getting in. But I personally worry more about people being able to get out. We obviously like to go into existing openings that we can fit through. I mean, city manager is correct. We have the ability to make holes pretty big to get in. Now, if we're looking at concrete foundations, that's a little different. But going down, and when we talk basement, typically people are talking about basements. We keep going to a basement, but this is all for all sleeping areas. But basements are a challenging situation for us in a fire. We're going down into the heat that's coming up. People need to be able to get out an alternative way, because their primary way of getting out could be cut off, and time is of the essence in this. So I don't want to come across as critical of the efforts being made here. I appreciate all the effort made to make things safer for not only the public that rents, and as we heard, a lot of people don't consider their situation, they just rent. But I also appreciate the effort to make firefighters safer too. It's all connected, interconnected. So I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chief. No problem at all. All right, Mr. Glass, go ahead and come forward, and give you around 5 minutes.
Yes. Honorable Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Well, as we've already covered, in December of 22, the council adopted a rental housing code. That's in a paragraph 8.80.030K. It includes requirements for egress that exceed those of the International Building Code and the International Residential Code. And the reason why they exceed it is because a single paragraph was lifted out of those documents, somewhat out of context. As a matter of fact, that paragraph appears in a section of the International Residential Code, which is called Planning New Buildings. So it was meant to be a standard for what you would do if you were starting from scratch with a clean slate and building a building, not necessarily something that was expected to be enforced upon buildings that already existed. And the requirements don't conform to the standard construction practices used in the majority of Laramie's housing, because it was built before those before that standard was written. It doesn't. They also, because it's only one paragraph, it doesn't include any of the exceptions provisions or grandfathering provisions that are in all of those codes, and doesn't allow for a safe and affordable provisions for escape and rescue, which are allowed in many other jurisdictions. The state statutes in Wisconsin were mentioned earlier, and those I think are actually a good model for what you do. And entire countries, the entire country of Canada has a standard which again is much more expansive and allows more practical ways of getting out. And unfortunately, satisfying that one paragraph in our ordinance would be financially or physically infeasible in many cases. And as a result, strict enforcement of those requirements would outlaw literally thousands of affordable garden-level apartments in Laramie. And I know this because when I campaigned to sit with you on council, I went around and knocked on thousands of doors. And I looked at the buildings, and I took pictures, which I have some. I have some to show you today, of some perfectly good examples of buildings where this would be a problem. In any case, I think we need to avoid creating a shortage of housing, and especially of affordable housing, because that would go against the principles that you established in your goal-setting session, and also just be a very bad thing. I think it would really harm a lot of renters. It would drive up rents, and it would really do great harm to Laramie's economy without necessarily making anything any safer. So here is what we have. Section K, every dwelling unit must include not less than 1 point of egress, ingress, and each sleeping area, this is key, shall have an emergency escape not less than 5 7/10 square feet with a minimum size net clear height dimensions, and it goes on to describe some dimensions, with a maximum height from the finished floor of 44 inches. Now, so I went and started looking at some of the windows in Laramie. And as you can see, this is a nice big window. But if you go ahead and you take a look at this building and you look at the height of the basement floor, which you can tell from the outside because it has stairs leading down to the basement, it doesn't meet those requirements, even though it's a beautiful exit window, because the sill just happens to be a little bit too high. Here's another example. This one's a little narrower, but you can get out of it. But this one doesn't meet the requirements either. Nor does this, because if you look, there's a door down those stairs which you can't see, and your typical doorknob is about 3 feet off the ground. So basically, if you get a foot above the doorknob, you can just tell from looking at the outside of the building that this doesn't satisfy the requirement either, and so on. Here's the full scene there. You can see that they're just a little bit too high. These older windows don't qualify as well. Even though it looks perfectly, I'd be able to get out of that. I think most of us would be able to. Most adults would be able to. Same thing with these. Same thing with this, and as we go, so far you can see some very nice and some very expensive windows. The building that this came from has windows that must have cost thousands of dollars in the lower story, and it even has small pits outside the windows. But as you can see, it's just a little bit too narrow to meet the requirements. Here's another example. It's just a little bit too high. And here's an example of a window well in new construction that doesn't meet the requirements. Why? Because there's no ladder. They took the ladder away, and I don't know why, but I suspect it might be for one particular reason, which is that this is a good place good way for burglars to get in, and some tenants have been removing them for that reason. There are other problems with digging a pit. Not only is it just a burglar's dream to get in, but in some cases, in places in Laramie, you'll hit the water table. You have a ladder outside, which is which can get slippery and covered with snow and ice. In fact, the cover can get slippery, so that and covered with ice. You may not be able to lift it. And what's more, if you have an existing building, you may not be able to dig the pit in the first place without getting a variance, because it may violate the setback requirements. So there are a lot of reasons why just going ahead and putting in this kind of a window isn't necessarily a good thing. Now, this is what I and my family have done in all of our rentals where we weren't sure about people being able to get out. This is exactly the same ladder that you would put in the pit outside. In fact, it was made for that. We went ahead and bent the metal so that we can install it here on the wall. And it is safer because it can't get covered with ice, because it's easier to access, because it's right there, and once you get out the window, you're at ground level. It's also probably better for, and I guess you have to ask a firefighter their opinion, but I think it's probably better for the firefighter too, because the firefighter is at ground level and is able to pull things in and out. So I think all around, this might be a better thing. But so we
start wrapping up, Mr. Glass. You're a minute and a half over.
Oh, I'm over. Okay. But in any case, I think we really need to look back at the building codes, and we need to look back at what other people have done in other places, because the strict requirements here are so onerous that, well, here we go. I just very quickly. Here is an estimate for a 2-bedroom apartment that we looked at trying to retrofit with a full pit and the ladders outside. This is a 2-bedroom basement apartment. It rents for $660 a month, and the cost to retrofit it would be $17,000, more than $17,000 from a reputable contractor here in town. That's several years' rent. And if you amortize it over 5 years, suppose you just want to recover that cost in 5 years, you have $328 would be the monthly payment on the loan. Well, that completely destroys the affordability of that apartment. And so what do? You either don't rent it, you take it off the market, which creates a housing shortage, or you raise rents to the point of non-affordability. We don't want to do either of those things. So I think we need to address this deficiency in the municipal code and figure out what we can do that's practical. And again, I'm over my time, so thank you for indulging me.
You bet, Mr. Glass. Yeah, thank you for taking time to put all that together for us. All right. Councilor Gabriel, please.
Councilor O'Doherty addressed this in one of our work sessions, that you had some work done on one of these windows. How much did you pay? Because I understand what Mr. Glass is talking about. $17,000 is extravagant indeed, but about you? If I could ask Councilor O'Doherty?
Sure, if you'd like. Yeah, if she's interested.
Considerably less because we did the work, but we also, if you buy the window and if you dig the hole, there are contractors that will put it in and do a really nice finished job. So it was for 3 windows, an order of magnitude less, or no, maybe $3,000. So, but I also want to add that the tax code is written for landlords. So you could write that stuff off. That comes off so your income becomes, anyway. So that's another factor.
Thank you. Councilor Newman, and then to the Vice Mayor.
Should we make sure that no other public comment before?
Oh, I'm not going to count Mr. Glass's. This is public comment. He had reached out before, and I told him he could have 5 minutes to speak to the council since he had largely driven this work session. I just took a little liberty on that one, Council, so thanks. So please,
I will make a comment then.
Yeah.
So a quick Google search, obviously Google knows everything, right? But there are key points that Mr. Glass said. So if your window is deeper than 44 inches, most building codes usually mandate the installation of an egress ladder or steps. Now, I am probably not a fan of the ladders per se, especially if firefighters don't know they're there. I could see like a tripping hazard or getting entangled with them. I do like the step process of it. And it also goes on to say that they have to be permanently attached. Then we're going to have to get into a loophole of what's permanently attached with a ladder, right? Which ladders can you use? Can you modify a ladder that was supposed to be for one thing, kind of stuff. But if we do a step and it meets building code steps and still does the 44 inches, I would like to maybe look into that, because still a firefighter doesn't have to worry if there's a ladder there or not, and it's still only the 44 inches. We've all got the emails about this, so I've been digging into this. There's a lot of cities that are going to strictly this step because they have to be looked at from city staff, and I think it would be easier, in my opinion, than a ladder. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Councilor. Vice Mayor, please.
I just wanted to comment. I did recently get an estimate, and it was right at $4,000, and it included a window that you just turn and open. It opens completely. There's no like pushing stuff up. You just turn and open. And it included a French drain to the street because occasionally with our couple of floodings, it jumped the curbs. So it was under $4,000, and it included a nice window and a French drain. So, and it has to go into the foundation. They're going to have to do the concrete, they're going to have to seal the window in, and we just did one in the back, and now we'll do one in the front.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Richardson, please.
Thank you. Well, let me lower my hand here. In thinking about this, I would be in favor of exploring the stairs or ladder, whatever, makes sense in that sense, but I am not in favor of reducing the size of those windows. The stair or the ladder creates another opportunity to escape and seems to be a safe opportunity to escape that a lot of other places have used. But again, that size of window is really for exit for a number of different size people to get in and out. So my perspective, I'm not willing to budge on that side, but would be interested in hearing more about the steps or ladders.
Thank you, Councilor Richardson. Councilor Doherty, and then Councilor Newman.
I'd be okay with the I don't know, steps per se, but a platform that gets you up to the 44 inches, because you could finish the floor on the platform. But it should be bolted in and not something that somebody moves. The first tenant comes in and says, well, that's in the way. I want to put my TV there or something.
Thank you. Councilor Newman.
And this is going back to Councilor Richardson's. One thing that I've been going back and forth on, and I still don't know which way to go. But we kind of have to look at this isn't a one-size-fits-all either. Some of those historic houses that are rented, I would hate for them to go in. Now, some of the photos that Mr. Glass showed, they probably need updated, right? But the one that, real nice picture window, but the actual sliding part of it doesn't match our requirements. Those are the windows I have in my house, and for me to have to go in and change those when they're already brand new isn't going to make sense. So we do kind of have to make sure that this isn't a one-size-fits-all, whether that's an appeal method or something to that effect. We should probably look into that, because I feel my windows are safe. They meet everything other than the size requirement, and it's funny that people say this, it's only an inch off. So an inch on both sides, because they open, inward, because they're off, now I have to go put in new windows, right? So that's just something that I would maybe, and I don't know how the appeal, don't ask me how that would work, because that's the part that I keep going back and forth on. I don't know how something like that would work. Anyways. something to think about.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Pierce, please.
Yeah, maybe Counselor Richardson, she has her.
You go ahead. You haven't spoken yet, Counselor Richardson.
Okay. I think one thing we have to remember is these are rental units. These are not the homes that we own.
My house is a rental. Let's make sure that's clear too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I rent my house.
Well, in that case, but I don't know, I just, whatever, I'm not going to be on council when.
I know, this is weird, right?
Right, so, have at it.
One more meeting, right?
But, just so safety is the key. And remember that steps burn, right? I mean, it's wood. Most steps are wood unless it's a hunk of concrete. It's going to burn, so just keep safety in mind.
Counselor Richardson?
Thank you. I just wanted to, I know when Councilor Newman said we need to take it on a case-by-case basis, but I think this has been kind of the sticking point for inspectors, is that people will say it's only an inch or two, and so then they find themselves in this tricky spot because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, for the folks who spoke earlier, but they find themselves in a tricky spot because they're having to decide when it's okay and when it's not. And so having those, sometimes having those definites makes things more clear for them rather than putting them in the position of having to decide when it's okay or not.
Appreciate that. Counselor Pierce, please.
Yeah,
And Chief, did you want to, go ahead, Chief.
I was just going to answer her question.
Please.
She's right on that, so.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And in
Counselor Pierce.
and in our ordinance, how far away or how many feet away is an actual access door? Like the one picture that Mr. Glass showed, here's the little itty bitty window, but it appeared to be 10 or 12 feet and you had a full size door. So is there something in our ordinance that, if you have a full size door leaving your basement, how far, do all your windows have to have egress if you have a?
Counselor, you have to have egress from each bedroom is the rule. So the door would count as the egress if you had a door in the bedroom to the outside.
But if it's right outside, it doesn't.
And the door obviously meets the standard. So that photo that we saw, I don't know if there's any way of knowing whether that is a bedroom or the entryway or the kitchen or the bathroom. It is just a window that you can see from the outside. So maybe to put that in perspective. And yeah, you just need egress. So if you had a door in your bedroom, you wouldn't need the window.
Right.
At all. Okay. Please, Councilor Gabriel.
I'm just curious if we could hear maybe from a contractor?
And Mr. Cisneros, I'd extend the same, a little extra time if you want it.
I would appreciate that because
you're
I think I can help educate you guys on a lot of this situation. I think for Mayor and council members, thank you for listening to me. I think, as Mr. Glass said, there was some misinformation. It happens. The question that I believe was asked is, what's the size of an egress window? And maybe not a lot more questions asked, and I'm not sure, I wasn't there. But I've got some information here, and I'm going to pass this out.
You can just hand it to the clerk.
And this was based on another city that has done everything, and they have done it very correctly. One of the biggest things that we need to take a look at, the ordinance that was written, there are minimum heights and minimum widths. And if you guys do the math on that and you calculate that up, that minimum height and minimum width only adds up to 4 square feet, okay? If you go into the code book, even in today's code book, there are different types of requirements for everything that happens. And what I'm showing you, if you folks go back to the next page, second page, it'll start talking about the different codes that have been in place for different time frames. And it'll talk about the changes that happened in these different time frames. And I really think that we've got this a little bit wrong. I think we should certainly follow something like this. This follows the International Residential Code to the T, ICC. And basically what it is the 5.7 square foot is for a secondary level, okay, upstairs. The 5 square foot is for a basement and also for a main floor level. Those are the exceptions that are inside of the code. The way that the code also reads is that if you have a window opening that can meet the minimum size requirements, width and height, if it's, say, a double hung window or a slider window, that window can come out and then be replaced with just simply a casement window that will give you the clearance that you guys are looking for to meet in the code, which is a fraction of the cost of an egress window cutting into everything. I'm not sure where you've got your $4,000 bids. I'd say stick with that all day long. Our average cost is $8,200 for an egress window. Now yours may not be as deep or lots of different things. Things transpire. This is really something that we should seriously take a look at. I am 100% for the rental code, and I want you guys to understand that. I am against the rental code the way it is written because I believe that it's incorrect, okay, based off of the code book, okay? And so what I think should happen is if a house was built in, 1970, well, let's say an apartment building was built in 1976 and the seal height requirement was 46 inches, and if the city of Laramie gave those folks that build that a building permit and an occupancy permit, there is no reason why we shouldn't honor that if it meets the minimum requirements of height and width. We're talking seal height. That is the big difference on a lot of these things. Now, I'm also 100% for all the rental properties that got turned into rental properties without permitting. I think the city council should enforce the rule and make them comply, because you have a lot of unsafe rental properties out there. You have somebody that took a single family home and turned it into a 3-unit apartment complex without a permit. Had they had a permit, all of these requirements would have already been made. So, we're talking about a lot of different things, but what I'm an advocate for is the folks that have purchased properties or even maybe built them years ago for their retirement and want to be able to not have to pay to have egress windows when the clearances are minimal, 1.5 inches, 2 inches, when they've already met the code and the building code requirements and received a certificate of occupancy for that particular house. And I'd really hope you guys would consider this, because I think that it's important to look at it from this perspective. This city did this correctly. They did all their research. They spelled it all out. And, sometimes when we're looking at doing new things, we think it's a great idea, and sometimes some of the research doesn't get done as well as it should have been. And I think that this is certainly an incident where this happened. And I would appreciate it if all of you folks could take a real hard look at this and make some decisions based upon what should be fair to people. So here's another instance that I want to bring up. We had this summer property owner that hired us to replace 2 egress windows. The cost was $16,000. It was in some pretty tight spots. But the other thing that transpired is while we opened up the walls, he had some concrete issues. Now, if he hadn't been required to change these egress windows, his concrete would have been stable. And I can tell you this because we had an engineer involved, okay? As soon as we opened it up, I told him, I said, look, we have to have an engineer in here in order for me to open up these walls any further to put egress windows in here. And the conclusion was that if we left the wall alone the way that it was, that it would be stable for, 40, 50 years. But if we opened up that wall and started to compromise the structural integrity of what was left on that wall, then they would have to completely redo the wall. On top of the $16,000, they had to put another $38,000 because we had to totally replace the wall. And so these folks have $54,000 into 2 egress windows. And so, you know, the expenses can get enormous for people. I'm a contractor. We get a lot of work from these people, but I want to do what's right. It's not necessarily about the work. It's about making sure that people are being treated fairly. And I think if we take a look at what these ordinances, or excuse me, these codes were, and the era of the build, I think we should address the ordinance based off of the era of the build, as long as it's meeting that minimum standard of 4 square feet. And like I said, you can look at the International Building Code, you can even look at what you guys did inside of the ordinance, and those minimum heights, add them up, they're 4 square feet, heights and width.
Thank you. Yeah, are you willing to take some questions? Is that
Sure.
Okay, Counselor.
I think that Mr. Cisneros hit on a key point, and that is if it was permitted. And so when the date that it was permitted to become maybe a basement bedroom
Absolutely.
is pertinent, as opposed to, like, it was built as an apartment building with these windows at this time, and it passed code then. So I think that's a really important point.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions for Mr. Cisneros? Okay. I appreciate you taking time to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Okay.
Mayor?
Please, Counselor Richardson, Mr. Cisneros, you may have a question coming. Yes.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. If he can just leave one more copy of that for me for Nancy to put, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be sure we'll put it in your mailbox, Counselor.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And we'll make some copies for the future council too, of all this stuff, since they're going to have to
Mayor, I'll
sort it
put
out.
a copy online for everyone.
Thank you. Okay, we'll put one in the agenda center as well online for members of the public that want to see this. Other questions, council members? One of the things I want to add to this before we turn it over to the public is, we spend a little bit of time here sort of diving into specifics about whether we like this thing or that thing, whether it be a step or a ladder or something of the sort. It seems to me, I'm no expert in this, but it seems to me that work has been done by other bodies far more qualified to have those conversations than us. So I would just maybe caution the council from heading down that path too far, and instead maybe we look into Mr. Glass's recommendation to take the entire section out of the ICC there. And I have not read that, but I also won't be voting on it. So, but I think you all who are going to be around might benefit from looking into some of that. And then I do think this Fort Collins model that was shared by Mr. Cisneros seems thoughtful as well. And I guess at a 30,000 foot level, I think if we can find ways, if the goal of the council, and I think this is the case, is to make sure people can get out safely, acknowledging that if it's 44 and a half inches off the floor, that is not meaningfully less safe than 44 inches, right? So I think some flexibility just makes sense in sort of my opinion. What that is exactly and where you all want to be flexible, I guess, is your choice. To Councilor Richardson's point, some people may have a harder time getting out of a skinnier window than another. And I think that's worth considering, but allowing that flexibility to put in, sort of a single window rather than a slider or something like that that makes sense to me. So I guess I'll leave it there and turn it over to the public. So if there's a member of the public wishing to speak to this beyond sort of the comments we've already had, and if you all have something to add, feel free, but we'll take that now. So 3 minutes if anybody has public comment. Same rules as always. Raise your hand on Zoom or come forward. All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment, come back to the council. Councilor Newman, please.
I'll just clarify, when I said I didn't like one versus the other, I don't like the modification of one versus the other, right? If it's something that it was made for that, because they do make ones that bolt directly to a wall, I would be okay with that. It's when we're modifying something else that was designed for the outside or, something, a window well.
Great.
So just to clarify that.
Thank you, Councilor. I sure appreciate that. Anyone else with comments? Councilor Richardson, please.
I also want to clarify a point of kind of the windows, as long as it is safe and that, makes sense. I don't care if it's one pane or two, but I still think that size, which Mr. Cisneros and Mr.
Hey, Councilor, could you turn off your camera and try? You're just breaking up a little. Maybe your internet is not as fast as you might.
It's fine.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Councilor Pierce.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Mr. Cisneros for coming down and providing this information, so thank you. And I'd also
Mr. Glass as well, thank you.
Yes, and I'd also like to say, as long as safety is the key factor here and allowing people to get out, then I think the goal is somewhat met. So I think that's good, right?
Thank you, Councilor.
Get out in case of fire.
There you go. All right.
Or flood.
Anyone else? Okay, we're going to go ahead and close that work session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff members, for your work in getting this, and special appreciation for it being so quick. There should be some recognition by the council that we asked you to do this 2 weeks ago or something far too short. So thank you for that, putting it all together quickly. Okay, council members, we have council updates. I'm going to ask you to do this quickly. Councilor O'Doherty.
I took copious notes from the National League of Cities meeting and left it in another notebook, so that helps. But the one thing that I really want to make sure our staff knows about, that there are a lot of little Easter eggs existing in the bipartisan infrastructure bill and in the Inflation Reduction Act that are still there, and we are eligible for rebates for things like solar panels and electric vehicles. It's called something like elective pay or something like that. So I want to make sure staff knows about that. It requires filing income tax, and I don't know how that works for a city, but so it's available to nonprofits and to municipalities. So I was hoping we could get a rebate on our truck. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Shumway.
I also would like to, I think the biggest thing I took away from the National League of Cities meeting in Tampa was the opportunity that the city will have to save a lot of money when we start using our water rights, when we pull water out of the river. The city of Tampa uses river water, and they have found a source and a method that saved them millions and millions of dollars. And all we have to do is, when it's time for us to start pulling water out of the Laramie River, call Tampa, and they can tell you the model that they're using. It actually came from the Netherlands, and it's fairly new, but it's one that is saving them millions and millions of dollars, and the water is coming out in much better drinkable quality than it was with the method that they used before that was more expensive. So I look forward to having the city, and I don't know what year, maybe 2050, we're going to start pulling water out of the river. I think that the cost will be greatly reduced because of the information that we gathered from Tampa's municipal water department on their research and implementation of the project that they have for their water supply.
Councilor Shumway, you just 10x'd what it cost for you to attend the conference. You just made that maybe more than that. He might have saved the city hopefully everything. All right, Councilor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I forgot my notes as well, and it was for the EAC meeting, which was really nice to attend their last meeting of the year, and frankly, my last meeting ever. And it was just nice, because years ago I was the liaison to that committee. And I think that particular group, and I'll get notes to you, Aaron, will really be interested in the 4th Street project update. So a reminder to them, because we have it scheduled for January 28th, if they could be made aware of that I think that would be great, because there were a lot of questions and a fair amount of misinformation running amok in that meeting. So that would be good.
Thank you. I don't have much by way of updates. Vice Mayor?
I have one.
Count on you.
Planning Commission met Monday on the 9th and approved for recommendation to council, the final plat creating one lot of about 0.7 acres at 26 and Grand for the Breeze Through Car Wash. And that will be coming to council.
Thank you. Councilor Newman?
I went to the Laramie holiday party. It was fantastic. The gingerbread houses that they all built, the different staffs and departments. I truly hope there are photos somewhere of those. And if not, you guys missed out. And then I challenged the new council, we need to put a gingerbread house in next year.
All right.
Good idea. You can call an official meeting for gingerbread house building. Councilor Richardson, and we'll come to you, Councilor.
But only 4.
Very laggy.
Okay, I got a picture of the very, very tiny human coming off of the giant gingerbread house that was on fire. So that's great. And then I attended the Disabilities Commission, and they got their beanies in for all of the folks who are volunteering to be snow angels, so that was pretty fun to see. They are also thinking about work for next year and thinking about how to kind of engage, and I need to touch base with Aaron, but engage with public art and how to make that kind of more interactive with those with disabilities, and thinking about some other access points for larger events around town. So that was it.
Thank you. Councilor Gabriel, please.
Yes, Councilor Shumway, Richardson, and I interviewed candidates for the Parks, Tree, and Rec Board, 3 openings, and the recommendations will be on the consent agenda next Tuesday. And then I'll be involved with the Vice Mayor and Councilor O'Doherty on interviewing candidates for the Planning Commission later this week. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor. All right. A quick agenda review, everybody. Anybody have any questions? And you're not free yet. We do have a special meeting coming up. Please, Councilor Newman. And then, City Clerk, did you have something first?
Whenever you're ready, Mayor, we do have a couple requests for additions.
Okay, sure. Why don't you go ahead with that, and then we can come to Councilor Newman.
Director Webb wrote me earlier today with Amendment 1 to the ARPA grant agreement between the State of Wyoming Office of State Land and Investment and the City of Laramie. There was a grant, an amendment that came through just today, so he just found out about that. So he'd like to add that. Appears to be on the regular agenda because it's 220 some thousand. Okay. And then the other item that I wanted to request from the council was possibly a resolution for appointment to the Laramie Police Advisory Board. Councilor Cumby, or Vice Mayor Cumby, and one other councilor will be holding interviews this week for that board. And so if you want to consider putting that on there, we could draft a resolution for that.
Thank you, City Clerk. Yeah, I think we would go ahead and put that on consent agenda, and then let's put Director Webb's item after item 12, just so he can get out of here. He may end up stuck for some other stuff, but he can present all in a row. So we'll just move 13 down.
Who left?
All right.
Police.
And
so I'm just curious if we're going to add the Laramie Police Advisory Board. I think that one's really critical for the next meeting, but we will also be completing planning as well.
Oh, and we could certainly add an additional one for planning as well.
And then we'd have our commissions ready to go in the first of the year.
Will you have those interviews done by Friday?
Yep.
Okay. then yeah, that's great. Go
Ryan
ahead.
just worked on setting those today. That's why it wasn't on the agenda previously, so
Yeah, sure,
apologize
go
for
ahead.
that, but-
Yeah, I'd say any of those appointments are just fine to go ahead and throw on the consent for next week.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep, any that are ready. All right, Councilor Newman, question you had?
I don't have a question, I have a comment.
Have at it.
13 and 14, the old 13 and 14, since you added those.
Right.
I made sure, hopefully, they show the photos of it. The building's pretty cool. I can vote on it because it doesn't affect, I don't get anything out of it. I don't even get to move to that building when they build it, which kind of bums me out because it's pretty cool, but it is exciting to see some cool stuff going over there.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I'm sure we can find a photo. If not, we'll just, you pass your phone around. All right, anybody else? Anything on this? Okay. All right, we're going to adjourn the work session, council members, and I'm going to go ahead and call this special meeting of the city council to order. And I suppose we would then need a roll call. Or can I do a roll call? I guess, yes, I need that. I'll come to you.
Gabriel.
Here?
Newman.
Here.
Badority. Here. Pierce.
Here.
Richardson.
Here?
Shumway.
Here?
Somerville. Absent. Cumby.
Here?
Harrington.
Here.
That's 8 present and 1 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you, City Clerk. We're going to go to Councilor Pierce then.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I move that we adjourn to executive session regarding personnel, Wyoming statute 16-4-405, lowercase a, Roman numeral 10.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Pierce, seconded by Newman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. All right, folks, we are adjourned to executive session. We're going to take a few minutes to clear chambers.